So today we're going to talk about how corporations and governments maximize economic damage. This becomes even more evident in a depression like we're in now and in a county like I live in. My county is pretty much like a third world nation. Most people that live here either because they can't get out or they moved here to increase their standard of living because everything is cheaper. Land, buildings, labor, etc. So when we look at the state of North Carolina, what North Carolina did was combine the payment of property tax on automobiles with registration renewal and inspection of the vehicle. So they make it extremely difficult for you to pay the property tax on a registered vehicle without getting it inspected or renewing the plate. Now, one thing I want to talk about with the inspections regime in the state of North Carolina, it's actually a gigantic money-making scam. Back in the late 1990s, I worked for the engineering company that used to calculate the discharge for Duke Energy and Progress Energy for pollution control credits. And we also did work for the state of North Carolina where they calculated how much money in federal credits the state received for pollution control inspections on cars. At that time, none of North Carolina was actually required to have an emissions program. The state did it to make money. They were as strict as California in areas that had air pollution. And as a result of that, they had a lot of pollution control credits and they sold them to Duke Energy and Progress Energy to offset the pollutants that were put out in the production of power. So the people of North Carolina were saddled with a scam inspection program and a yearly renewal of registration and inspection in order to generate money for the state. Now, several years ago, the state of South Carolina repealed their vehicle inspection law, and if you look at the two states, and there's no issues. So something to keep in mind. So what happens is you get fined for late payment of the property tax. You get fined for late payment of the registration if your car fails inspection, or in the case of this vehicle, you can't get a part. So there's no exception in the law, and they knew this when they passed it. And in today's economic situation, parts are very difficult to obtain. So the dealer wanted around $350 for a hub that had a wheel speed sensor for the ABS system on this automobile. Now, the problem is you can't get an inspection passed if you have any ABS lights on. Now, this particular car defaults to standard brakes when the ABS sensor fails. Other cars don't do that. So, in some cases, you can drive a car with the ABS light on. Some cases, you can't. It depends on your vehicle. Now, the dealer wanted $350 for the hub with the sensor. Now, the rear wheels on this vehicle, the sensor is made on the back inside of the hub. And they won't sell you the sensor separate from the hub. Now, you can go overseas and buy just the sensor, but the delivery is uncertain. It could be here in 2 days. It could be here in a month. So people have a real issue with this. Now, the auto parts store had a long lead on the rear wheel sensors for this vehicle. So I went out on the net and I found that A1 Auto Parts had a performance hub. And I could buy 2 performance hubs as a set with the new sensors on them, totally new parts, cheaper than I could buy 1 rebuilt hub. So of course I bought the pair of performance hubs and I replaced it and cleared the sensor. Now, one interesting thing is, since this is a poor county, I went to 2 auto parts stores, and the readers they had for the data on these cars, the OBD2, would not read ABS at any of these stores. And my old tool wouldn't read ABS. So on Amazon, I found a tool for $145 that reads ABS and all the other codes on cars. Now, it's a similar tool to the old one I had that would only read check engine light codes. So it cost me about $200 for the tool and the 2 performance hubs plus shipping. Now, the dealer would have charged me $350 for the hub and $200 labor, and nobody around here can afford that. So as usual, you know who ends up working on all this crap. So I've actually done a lot of ABS brake work, and what you find is replacing the sensors is not difficult. In some cases it's time consuming. Now replacing the computer or replacing the ABS pump, that's a whole different ball game. That's something that I wouldn't do. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is corporations deliberately withhold parts like this. So since there's nothing wrong with the old hub, I'm going to get a sensor from overseas and rebuild that hub, so I have an extra hub on the shelf for this vehicle because I like the vehicle, and I'll probably buy another one. So just keep in mind, corporations and governments work together to increase the economic damage against you. Now, personally, I think it's unconstitutional to combine taxes in such a way that you can't pay one at a time. So the state of North Carolina, it went very rogue liberally about 30 years ago. When I was a kid, the rural areas controlled the politics of North Carolina. Today, the 5 urban centers in their liberalism control the politics. And you find out they actually punish their own constituents, which are mostly poor, even more than the opposition. So keep in mind, corporations, politicians, and governments will always maximize the economic damage on people in their area. Please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.